Hey folks, it's Phoebe with Shrubs That Blooms. This is just a quick update on the seedlings from the last post. So at that point, the dianthus had started coming up but wasn't fully there yet, but we've got a whole beautiful tray of dianthus. There's a few spots where maybe something didn't come in, but generally I think we're gonna have well over 200 dianthus out of this one little cafeteria tray. Over here we've got foxglove. They also have been coming in really well. There's a variety or two that didn't do much of anything, but you may recall I am not super in love with foxglove, so I don't really care that much if there's some that don't make it. Over here is one of our 3 trays of lisianthus. You can't really see the seedlings in there, but they're there. They're so tiny, you can kind of see one right there. Similarly up here, 2 more trays of lisianthus with itty bitty teeny seedlings in them. And over here we've got eucalyptus that's coming really nicely. I did end up receiving the lemon eucalyptus and it's already up. So we've got a whole, I think this is 40 cells of eucalyptus. Ginger's over in the corner there in her little bed, hanging out. Sadly, this heat mat appears to have died, and I don't really know why, but it is the oldest one I have, so I've had it for several years, so it might just have kind of given up the ghost. But I still got 2 more, which is probably going to be plenty for the rest of the season. This tray has Icelandic poppies and pansies in it. There's one variety of pansies that just 0% germination, so I'm going to have to double check my notes. I think it was the ruffled feathers or something variety, and just check those seeds because I remember them not coming up very well last year, but I got something at least, but nothing. The little seedlings that are in there are poppy seedlings that kind of got flicked around because the seeds are so tiny. Similarly, there is a variety of the Icelandic poppy that didn't germinate as well, so I'm pretty sure it's the champagne bubbles, and I have read that that one can be a little more finicky, but overall, I'm pretty happy with how these are going, and I really don't need a lot of either of these kind of groups of flowers, so I'm happy with it. I'm really, I mean, it would be nice if those had come up, those pansies, but oh well, too bad, so sad, I guess. And you can tell I really overseeded on these poppies here. These ones up here, I was being a little more careful and took my sweet time a little bit more versus just like dumping them on this one. On the last video, someone mentioned they've seen folks use soil blocks before, but never really seen people show how to water them. So in this instance, I just have a little watering can. It's probably only about a quart or a liter, and it's got a really small diameter nozzle, whatever you want to call it. So it fits right in between these blocks. And it's a little tedious, but it does give me time to check on all my seedlings. Somebody else in the comments mentioned that they use a capillary mat, which sounds so fancy, and that sounds like a really wonderful thing to explore in the future because it would be super efficient. There are times when I do have to be gone for work for multiple times or multiple days of the week, so it would be nice to have a setup where I can just not leave soil blocks sitting in water in hopes that they'll kind of weather that. And generally you want to make sure they're soaking up the water pretty quickly. I think I just, for the purposes of demonstration, overwatered this dianthus tray. So they will soak the water right up, and sometimes it might take a moment. The other thing you have to be careful of, you can kind of see it here, making this little like concave bank situation where the water was eroding. Those little white things are roots coming out. So you do have to be extra careful when you're watering, when the roots haven't become well established within the blocks, because you can erode your soil blocks, which I did a little bit right there. So there are a few caveats and a few different considerations to take into account when you're using soil blocking, but generally I've been really happy with it. If all of those blocks came up, there were 240 seedlings in this tray, which for a little cafeteria tray, that's a lot, and it's great. And I'm really excited that this is a thing that I have access to. Up here we have a tray of delphinium and columbine each, more or less. So the delphinium, both of these types of flowers take a little bit longer to germinate, so it's not surprising that they're still just kind of coming along, or in the columbine's case, just barely starting to pop up. With the delphiniums, we've got multiple varieties over here. I'm really excited about the sky blue version of the Magic Fountains, which is what that MF stands for. There is the Connecticut Yankee mix. Is barely starting to get going, but again, they can take like up to 2 weeks or more to germinate, so I'm trying to be patient. Delphiniums have kind of an interesting cotyledon structure where they have these really long little stems on the little leaflets. So they're pretty distinct in terms of what their seedlings look like when they first germinate. Over here in the back is another variety of delphinium that I didn't have space for in the first tray, and that's what first came up in either of these trays, and I was a little perplexed, and then I remembered mixed tray, and that's why I try to not do mixed trays as much anymore, because it makes me confused when things come up and I don't remember that they're there. But anyway, there's a handful of varieties of columbine in here. Down here at the end, the Rocky Mountain Blue is coming up really well. It's the first one that kind of showed signs of life. There's a few others scattered in here, but again, it's one that can take several weeks to germinate and come up, so I'm not too concerned about the fact that they're not really showing up yet. You'll notice on the end caps here, kind of, the seedlings are bending in. If you can kind of see if it'll focus, yeah. So this light setup isn't perfect by far. Like, I do have to rotate the trays and move stuff around a good amount to keep the seedlings from just like growing in one direction if they're under this light like this. But again, working with what you got. That's what it looks like in here. I'm gonna need to rearrange and do a little bit of shuffling to make more space, because I'm going to start my snapdragons very soon. And then I have quite a bit of winter sowing to do outside. I'm really excited to have like 100 arena gold this year. Oh, it's gonna be so magical. Anyway, that's what the seedlings are doing right now. So we're out in the greenhouse tunnel outside. There's Ava trying to eat the very last bits and bobs of snow she can find, because she really likes the crunchy water. I'm getting ready to winter sow a bunch of flowers primarily, and then a few different varieties of lettuce. The premise of winter sowing is that you're putting seeds out into kind of the wild environment and just letting them do their thing and wake up as they would with nature. I'm cheating a little bit by having them in this tunnel, but the premise also involves like maybe using milk jugs or soda bottles, anything that's clear that can act as a mini greenhouse. So this is just an actual hoop tunnel greenhouse thing that we've got going on here. And my like growth and understanding of like, of course this should work, came from a channel called Tanya with the Flowers, and she has a ton of resources on winter sowing, so I would point you in that direction if you want to see like a how-to in depth with like the milk jugs and that kind of situation. I'm starting all this stuff inside the tunnel today. Hopefully oh, she just had a big old chunk of snow. Anyway, these are all going into this size of tray here. So we've got lots of different kinds of sweet peas. We've got some poppies, which generally really don't appreciate being transplanted, but I've found that if I just try to seed them out, I never find them again, or I accidentally weed them out or something like that. This is all Godetia. I don't have any purchased seed yet. I just ordered some today because I realized this was all I had, and I really would like to have it because I'm doing my first ever wedding this year, and it would be perfect timing and the perfect colors. We've also got clarkia. There's a little depiction of what it looks like. They're gorgeous. I have it in a couple different like color styles. Pale even primrose, which is a native species that I'm going to try to start a bunch of. We've got campanula, different couple kinds of campanula, and then hollyhocks and a whole bunch of yarrow. Also starting all kinds of larkspur today, and then a few bits and bobs like some different species of bee balm, or monarda is the Latin genus for it. Also Crispedia or drumstick flower. I saved a bunch of seeds off the dianthus last year, and so I'm gonna try winter sowing those and see how we get, or where we get with that. Chamomile does phenomenally in this setup. If there's a bunch of scratching and scrabbling in the background, it's because Ava is trying to dig through the ice in her kiddie pool. So that's what's happening. So yeah, chamomile does really well. Coreopsis reseeds itself like crazy anyway, so this is just so I can plant it where I want it and know that I'm going to have these colors. Otherwise I can like transplant it. And these are my last few Sorrent seeds. I think this is Kiwi Blue is the original seed that I had. So I haven't used this a lot in flowers because I found it awkward to work with, and in our climate it gets warm really fast and it gets attacked by aphids really fast. But I'm going to keep trying it in just little chunks to see if I can get the timing right. I kind of think a fall planting of this would work better, so I might try to do that this year as well. Ava, ma'am. We've got some bachelor buttons, which I only do a few of. Bells of Ireland, which will probably show up in droves via volunteering. So I do like, I learned this year the volunteers kind of get going and are pickable pretty early. And then if I do a second kind of planting of them, I get this nice succession. So that was great. And like I said, I'm going to do a couple varieties of lettuce. And then that's about it. So we've got a lot to get done. I have a lot of stuff I want to start inside this weekend too. But this I've shown you before. I'll show you another little clip of it just so you can get a feel for it. A lot of these won't be covered, like the bigger seeds will need to be pushed down into the soil, but a lot of the smaller stuff like the Godetia and the clarkia definitely needs light to germinate. So they'll be just sown straight on top, and I might put a little layer of vermiculite on top. Our beautiful wreath is starting to mold in earnest, especially for some reason the eucalyptus seems particularly prone to it. I don't know if it's just, maybe it wasn't all the way dry when I used it, but I'm gonna give it, oh yeah, the river oats are molding too. I'm gonna give it a little bit more time in here, but I'm gonna need this space in the next month or so, so I'll probably compost it, but still bringing me happiness in here, and let's get to it. So I only filmed doing a couple of these trays of this type, and then also when I did the larger trays that I put the larkspur and that kind of stuff into. You can see I'm adding vermiculite like I mentioned, and that's just to hold and like regulate moisture on top of the seeds so that they don't dry out as they're germinating. I don't have a lot of vermiculite left. I have it left over from when I was storing dahlias in it as an experiment to see if that worked well for me. I don't know if I'll rebuy it afterwards. I don't really love having all these different kinds of inputs in seed starting, so I'm trying to, narrow it down where I can, but it is handy to have while I have it. So using that up, and there we go. We're almost on the last tray. I think all told, there's about 1,600 cells that got planted. So if, 80% of those make it, that'll be a whole lot of flowers and lettuce. With a few distractions, that took about 2.5 hours. And we got all of these trays filled with all kinds of seeds, and those as well. I need to clear up more stuff down there to make space on the shelves for the actual trays, but it's starting to get kind of chilly in here, so I'm gonna call it a day and move on. But I do have like a little pump sprayer. I'll come through and give everything a bit of a water. These down here were planted a couple weeks ago now, and you can kind of tell they're starting to dry out, so I just need to make sure they're kept kind of moist. I'll probably come through and put something underneath these trays too to catch any soil or water that would be draining out, and also try to just keep them more humid, because that's something I've run into in the past, is with trays drying out, because it's just kind of awkward to keep them watered, especially when there's no water running outside like there is right now. So that's it for today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.